announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings and can also be found on fellahcouncil.com. I note that the hour has come. Will the clerk please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that they are present when their name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image can be displayed on screen when you speak. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Thomas.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I'm present.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember Heenan.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember O.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I am also present.
And Councilmember Dom.
Good morning, Madam Chair and colleagues. Present.
Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Appropriations regarding Bill number 210328. Will the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill number 210328, authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2021 from the general fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, the Grants Revenue Fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, and the Community Development Fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, to the General Fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, and the Community Development Fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who's been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this is a public hearing which is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for the witness, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Will the clerk please call the first panel we have to testify this morning on Bill 210328?
Marissa Waxman.
Good morning,
Thank you.
Marissa. You are
Good
connected and you can proceed. I just want to note for the record that we have all departments are available. We have circulated the request and the following memo details from your office to members of the committee. So we'll let you testify and then we'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Quinones Sanchez and members of the City Council Committee on Appropriations. My name is Marissa Waxman, Budget Director, and I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 210328. This bill provides amendments to the FY21 operating budget totaling $26.5 million. I'm joined by representatives of departments affected by this legislation: the Mayor's Office, Labor, Managing Director, OIT, Streets, Homeless Services, Prisons, Procurement, Law, Register of Wills, District Attorney, and Commerce. And I can field questions for Finance and may have some more folks on. Within the Community Development Fund, this legislation transfers $3.88 million from CDBG CARES Act funding for small and minority business relief, the Neighborhood Development Fund to support community development corporations, and the Targeted Corridor Management Program. Within the General Fund, there is $22.6 million in funding, with $10.7 million coming from the Grants Revenue Fund and the rest resulting from transfers among and within departments. The Managing Director's Office seeks to reallocate $5.7 million between classes within its budget with no overall increase in funding level. The reallocated funds will enable the money from the Council's new normal support for CLIP to be used for necessary equipment and supplies, as well as allow acquisition of public safety equipment and technology, like vehicles, contraband scanners, radios, and personal escape systems. Additionally, funds will be used for uniforms for the Mural Arts Job Training Program. OIT requests $1 million, an increase for services related to One Philly, and this request is entirely offset by a transfer from the Office of the Director of Finance, where positions for One Philly were not filled. The prisons requests a net increase of $1.7 million and will reallocate a total of $5.2 million within its budget for a total of $6.99 million. With the rise in the inmate census, additional funding is needed for costs that increase with increased population, namely food and medical services. With the courts closed after the initial reduction in population, intakes dramatically outpaced releases and resulted in longer stays. The Office of Homeless Services requests $1 million, of which $500,000 is for the Kensington Home Repair and Assistance Program, and the other $500,000 is for medical service changes related to the Riverview Care Home. The Kensington Home Repair and Assistance increase is offset by a transfer from the Managing Director's Office for $500,000. The Department of Labor requests $19,000 for translation services related to the Domestic Worker Task Force and copier maintenance. This is partially offset by a $9,000 internal transfer from another class in the Department of Labor budget. Procurement requests $2.29 million for prior year and election-related advertising costs. The Streets Department requests $1.8 million. Of this, $1.15 million stems from snow removal costs due to the abnormal frequency and severity of snow events in FY21 compared to recent years. The remainder is funds required to repay PennDOT for a project on Bells Mills Road that they had funded. The project was started but was not completed due to community concerns. Repayment is required due to the lack of completion. The Mayor's Office requests $34,000 for the required Child Welfare Oversight Board, which reviews activities at DHS. In prior years, this was funded in the MDO, but with the creation of Office of Children and Families, the funding was eliminated in MDO, but not added elsewhere. This funding is included in the Mayor's Office in the proposed FY22 operating budget as well. Law requests $1.4 million in costs for services that exceed the amount previously approved for funding. Unanticipated costs include $400,000 for the after-action review of the City and Police Department response to the civil unrest following the killing of George Floyd, and $800,000 for outside counsel for the District Attorney's Office for litigation arising from labor, employment, and office policy-related matters. The Register of Wills requests $137,004 for prior year services invoices. The District Attorney's Office requests $2.8 million to sustain current service levels. Previously, the city had been hopeful that CARES Act funding would be able to cover these costs, but further evaluation revealed that it was not an allowable use for those grant funds. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Bill 210328. I and the representatives of the affected departments are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Marissa. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then I'll open up to my colleagues if they have any other additional clarifying questions. Let me start with the law department. And the 1.4 million, you said that 400,000 of that was for the social unrest, 800 was for the DA's office. Can we get some clarifying points on representation and conflict counsel?
Sure. Let me see if Diana Cortez, the city solicitor, Craig Straw are on. Are you able to speak to that?
Yes. Good morning. Buenos dias, Councilwoman Sanchez. Thank you, Marissa. So which one did you want to start with, Councilwoman?
Well, both, because I think the spread was 400,000 for the social unrest and then 800,000 for the DA's office. Is that because of conflict counsel requirements, or just want to get clarity?
Sure. As to the for the 800,000 on the DA's office, it was conflict counsel regarding the employment discrimination cases by the former DAs that were terminated upon Mr. Krasner's start at the DA's office. So those were the 800,000.
Are those settled, or do we expect?
No, those are not. One has been, is my understanding, one has been dismissed, and the others are still pending cases.
Okay. And the 400 around the social unrest?
Yes, so it was those different after-action reviews that we had, that obviously we did not anticipate everything that happened last summer. And then we had to hire those different firms to conduct their independent reviews and their different investigations.
Are those closed too, or those are still pending?
Those are closed.
Thank you. Thank you, City Solicitor Cortez.
You're welcome.
I have a question for the finance technology around One Philly. I noticed that there's $1 million in purchase of services from the finance office, and there's also $1 million for technology. Can someone provide us an update of how this is going to correct some of the mistakes we've been having on One Philly? Any updates that we should be aware of?
So I believe Kat Lamb, First Deputy Finance Director, is trying to join, but may not have been able to join yet. Mm-hmm. I can give the overview of the movement of funding is not a net increase, but we had anticipated doing the work this year of One Philly with city staff. We weren't filling those positions, so we'll continue to use contractors, and that is the shift of moving the money from 100 to 200. But unfortunately, I don't see. Oh, I believe I now do see Kat Lamb on. Kat, I know you're probably just joining as we were talking, but council member asked if, what's going on with One Philly and the correction of errors and the movement of the funds.
All right. I guess I'll start with the movement of funds. Marissa did explain it accurately. The goal with this fiscal year was to transition from more contracted staff to more full-time employees supporting it. And so class 200 contracted staff in OIT's budget, and then class 100 was in finance's budget to hire the new employees. Unfortunately, we just have not had luck finding the skill set that we need. It's difficult, and I think CIO Mark Wheeler has talked about this in some of his budget hearings as well. It's very difficult for us to hire and recruit technology talent. So we just weren't able to hire as many people as we had hoped or anticipated. So that's why we're moving the class 100 back to OIT to cover the class 200 that we had to retain.
So what are we doing about building institutional capacity then to manage it? Or do we intellectually own this software, or is this on contract?
So we own the licenses from Oracle. And I mean, we do have a full-time team of employees. We do have full-time employees that are supporting it. It's a team of about 11, or I think it's up to, 14. I have to confirm my numbers. But so we have full-time employees that are the core One Philly support mechanism. The contractors just augment them with some development skill sets that we haven't been able to hire for. But we own our licenses for Oracle, and any of the code that we've, or the configurations that we've done is our not our IP, but is, we have every right to access it.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'd like to talk to the Commissioner of Prisons. Want to kind of get an update. We've seen some recent reports around some of the staffing challenges and public safety. Any update that you want to provide now on the record? I realize there's additional funding because of the increase of your census numbers. Anything update you want to provide for the record?
Yes, good morning, Councilwoman Sanchez. I do want to update that we announced the job announcement to hire new correctional officers on the 17th. That will run through the 28th, and we will begin to work with OHR to get the test ready to hire staff. We also have a current list of applicants and candidates in the pipeline that are being reviewed for the requirements, and we look forward to onboarding a class in mid-June.
And how long would that class be in session, and when will they be activated? I know you have quite a staffing issues around overtime, and so can you speak to that?
Yes, so that class will run for approximately 10 and a half weeks. Once we're able to get that class cleared, mid-June, it'll run for 10 and a half weeks, and we'll be able to onboard in late July. Also, we are covering the existing posts that we have with staff, and we're utilizing overtime to ensure we have the posts covered in the facilities.
So do you have enough staffing now to ensure that prisoners are not having to be locked up for lack of staffing? I mean, can you speak to that a little bit? What's the conditions?
Yes, we are adequately staffed. We continue to work with the workforce and the unions to encourage staff to report to work. We've been working with the union for a while now. We believe we're adequately staffed. We're just working to get that cohort of folks back into the workforce. We know we've supported the staff in providing and extending the various type of leaves that were made available under the CARES Act, the city for COVID-related leave and childcare, and we'll continue to support the staff. So we're hoping that those staff will begin to return back in. And we've also had a few staff request reinstatements. We've reviewed their records and reinstated them accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to not monopolize the time. I have several council folks queued up for questions. I'm going to start with Councilman Alan Dom, and then Councilman Thomas and Councilman Heenan. Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. My question might be for either Mark Wheeler or Rob DeBoe. It has to do with, I just wanted to get on the record, what was the original budget for One Philly, and where are we today as far as cost for One Philly?
Okay. I don't believe that Rob is on. I do not have the One Philly costs on the top of my head. We can certainly get back to you with those, unless, Kat, you know those off the top of your head.
Unfortunately, not right now. I can look through my files, but I don't have it open right now.
I guess what I'm looking for is what we originally thought it was going to cost and where the number is today. And I ask that in the context because I know we're going to start investing in replacing other legacy systems in the city through multiple departments. And I wanted to see what we've learned from the One Philly experience that we can make sure we don't duplicate when we start replacing our accounting or financial software going forward. Like, what do we learn from that we could take away and do a better job in this next round of implementation?
Certainly. So we'll be able to get back to you with those numbers, and just to make sure everyone's got it in this transfer ordinance, there is no increase in funding requested for One Philly. It is a reallocation of funds from one department in one class to another department in another class, but it is entirely offset and has no impact on fund balance.
Okay, so let's just say that we don't have the numbers, but what lessons can any of you share with us that we can learn from that experience that we don't have to duplicate going forward if we're going to invest money in new systems?
So we actually have documented that as part of the Opal planning process, the lessons learned from One Philly that we want to try to avoid for Opal. So we can also send that as a follow-up to you as well.
Okay. Because I mean, I know we've had tremendous issues with One Philly, and I don't want to be here in a year or two talking about other issues that are similar to what happened with One Philly. I think it's kind of what Councilmember Sanchez was alluding to, the takeaway and learning and not duplicating the mistakes we made in the past. So I'll look forward to that information. I have a question for the procurement. Is it Monique Nesmith Joyner? Is she available?
Yes, good morning.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
The appropriation going towards unpaid invoices they're about 7 months old. That was a concern. I was just wondering, how long does it usually take us to pay invoices? And why are we entering into unfunded contracts and coming back to this committee basically to fund those later?
What typically happens is there is a delay in receiving invoices, to be honest with you, from the newspapers. Historically, this has been an issue. For example, we are now in May and we still do not have invoices for ads that were placed in January. So the newspapers themselves are delayed in providing us with invoices. We also, just so you know, have a project underway to determine what are the required advertising needs for each department. So we are trying to avoid any overages that we have experienced in the past. In that project, we should have some feedback on that project, I would say maybe by the end of June, so that we can roll it out appropriately across the departments in July. And what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, it would seem to be entering into unfunded contracts, and then you're coming back to this committee to fund them later. I'm just wondering why we're doing that. Why is that not presented in advance?
I don't know that we're entering into unfunded contracts. It's just that the departments, we are trying to establish accountability across the board. We are required to advertise in the 3 highest circulated newspapers in the city. And some departments opt to advertise in outside of those parameters, and those create increased costs. We also are trying to, specifically with elections, to narrow and have city commissioners go directly through procurement, so that, and not reach out to the newspapers, directly, so that we can monitor costs for those advertisements and be very specific about those advertisements, because there was an increase in the cost of advertising specifically for the presidential election last year. So there's about 1.8 million of that 2.2 that is specifically for presidential election advertising.
Are you saying like a publication like the Inquirer is not sending us a bill?
Yes.
Okay.
They're late with the invoicing. So along with the invoicing, they also send clips of the actual advertisements. So the city has a requirement that we're trying to work through to navigate to reduce the amount of actual paper. They actually, certain offices in the city require the physical advertisement, a clip of the advertisement, and that sometimes takes the newspaper some time to get to us, to be honest with you. Especially in this last year, they've had some staffing concerns, as you can imagine. So, but historically, they are late in getting invoices over to us. So it's not just that we are not processing the invoices in time, but we do not receive them timely.
Thank you. Our next question is for Michael Rashid, our Commerce Director, is on. I'm just curious, I saw in the budget, what kind of technical assistance we're providing to businesses with the CDBG and CARES dollars. What would that look like for a small or medium-sized type business, the technical assistance?
So, Commerce Director.
Hi, everyone. The Commerce Director isn't on this morning. I'm Sarah Stelz. I'm the Chief of Staff in the Commerce Department, and I believe Yvonne Boyd is on as well from the Commerce Department. So if Yvonne, who is expert in this area, isn't available, I can take the question.
No, I'm here.
Oh, she's here. Okay.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Yvonne Boyd. I'm the Senior Director of the Office of Neighborhood Economic Development in the Commerce Department. And the funds were extra funds we received as a result of COVID, and we were able to increase our TA assistance that we've been giving to businesses. This went specifically, can you hear me? Yes, this went specifically to fund obstacles, I should say, opportunities of obstacles that we saw as a result of COVID. We tried to increase the e-commerce presence of the small businesses that we work with in the commercial corridors. We also tried to give more access to professional services. We realized that most of our businesses, not most, well, some of our businesses were unable to access the relief funds that came out because of their tax situation. So we're using this monies to kind of subsidize these services so that these businesses can get their documentation ready and available as they move forward. So those were the main sources of technical assistance that we've provided with the additional dollars.
Are you saying, which I think is a good idea, you're saying that these monies were used to help small businesses fill out all those complicated forms, basically, so they could access the federal funding and maybe PPP money, and if it's restaurants, this next grant of money? Are we actually providing that level of support to leverage those dollars?
Yes, some of it went to that, and some of it went to help them actually do their pay for tax, the tax preparers, to help them get their documentation ready.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Yvonne, can you stay on a minute real quick?
Sure.
What are you looking to do as it relates to minority contractors? Given all this infrastructure and capital money, is there a plan for how, similar to what we saw with small businesses and helping these smaller contractors with their back office and TA needs?
We haven't thought about that specifically. We do work with the Enterprise Center, who's working with their contractors to do this, and we fund them to do that. But we're doing that already. We were doing that already, and so with this additional monies, we're not necessarily going there.
Okay. All right. We will continue to have that conversation with the Commerce Director. I think there's a lot of TA necessary for the contracting component with all the infrastructure money, and we should really ramp up. I mean, I know that the Enterprise Center and Della Clark and her team do a good job, but I foresee us needing to do a lot more on this in this particular space. So thank you, ladies.
Yes,
The chair is going to recognize Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Then Councilman Heenan, so he can queue up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is actually, I'm going to follow up with a line of questioning from Councilman Gadam around the procurement and those dollars that are being allocated for advertisement. Besides newspaper advertisement, because we're talking about a significant amount of money, I get the delay. I'm wondering what other advertisement exists? Like, where else did we advertise besides in newspapers? And also, who has the contract for the buy ad? Like, what company is that gets the contract to be able to make those media buy ads?
So procurement's responsibility is only for the newspaper ads. Individual department.
Record, just to be sure. I'm not sure the stenographer can follow as we keep switching up. If you can just say your name for the record, Monique.
Oh, I'm sorry. Monique Neesmith Joyner, Procurement Commissioner. So procurement is responsible for newspaper advertising only. Individual departments are able to contract for anything outside of newspaper ads. So any media ads, whether it's a radio ad or an actual television ad, they also can advertise through their social media platforms if they have one.
Okay, so this 2.29 is just newspaper advertisement.
That's correct.
Thank you. My next question is for the Register of Wills. We see $137,000 request as it relates to the Register of Wills office for legal fees. I'm wondering if someone can explain that cost, if we have someone here who can justify that.
Good morning. Actually, I'm here. Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Quinella Sanchez. Sorry, I'm not even getting over 2 ear infections, so I hear echo, so bear with us. Good morning to the members of the Committee of Appropriations. I have here today with me my Deputy of Government Affairs, Emilio De Gregoria, and my Financial Director, Errol Dyke. Our FYI budget general fund request for Register of Wills is to increase funding in the following classes, and that's $137,000 for Class 200 purchase of services. So these increases are not partially or totally offset by interdepartmental transfers, as we require additional funds to settle all our payments. This past year, we've had difficulty due to the pandemic with these funds. In the FY21, we plan to settle all professional service payments owed to vendors in FY21 for prior year service invoices. And due to the current pandemic situation, departments were required to make cuts, and no additional funds was provided for Class 200 in the prior year to close out all pending obligations. So that's why we're requesting the extra money.
Thank you, Madam Registrar. I'm not 100% sure if that is reflective of what was communicated. I think what I was under the impression of was that the dollars were being requested for legal services. And when I'm thinking about legal services, I'm wondering, like, how did we see an increase in legal service, in legal requirements and legal activities if we were all just in a pandemic last year? So based on your testimony today, it's not necessarily about legal services last year. It's about past invoices in general for the department, or is it about increasing in staff coming into the next fiscal year?
No. Errol, you could explain to him what.
Good morning, Chairperson.
To our councilman.
I'm Errol Dika, the Finance Director. So the $137,000 includes the legal fees. So that's related to the changes of administration, which were done prior to the pandemic. So we were requested to hire a legal firm as well as the $137,000 includes an auditing firm, which was brought in to audit the books. And also the partial of it was part of the outreach coordination that the register followed through with the residents. So it's not just $137,000 for just legal fees. That includes like 3 vendors that were brought in prior to the pandemic, before the pandemic hits.
So basically, these are dollars that are already spent.
Yes.
Thank you. My last, I guess you could say, statement before I sign off. I heard my colleagues ask a few questions about One Philly. I'm not going to ask any questions to One Philly at this point, because every time I ask a question or make a request, either I'm giving information that's not factual, or I'm being told that folks will get back to me. So Councilmember Sanchez, the chair, talked about issues that have existed with past employees. The communication, again, that was communicated to this legislative body is not true. As a person who's been a victim of these mistakes, this is my 3rd time with One Philly coming before me, and I have yet to hear from anyone from One Philly since dollars were taken out of my paycheck without my permission, as well as without my signature. So I do think that that is very disingenuous to come before this legislative body today, again, with information that's not factual, and now ask us to vote to give One Philly $1 million more. I will definitely not be voting for this transfer ordinance today. I will not be voting for anything that gives One Philly more money until we put ourselves in a position to be able to rectify these issues. I'm talking to not just the listening audience, but I'm also talking to my colleagues. There was a story that was published in the Tribune that talked about the issues that my office faced and other people face in an in-depth manner. One Philly has come before this legislative body multiple times. I've raised these issues with One Philly multiple times, and I can tell you firsthand that the only time I speak to One Philly is when we are in these hearings. I still have not heard from anyone on that side. And I just ask, people who are in the position that I'm in, people who are in the position as my staff is in, as well as other city employees who've been victims without our knowing, without any communication at all to their mistakes, and then to put ourselves in a position where money is taken out of our paycheck without any communication and without our permission and done consistently. I don't think it's fair that we continue to vote to give money to fix any problems that One Philly face until they can put themselves in a position where they're addressing basic human resource issues. This is not anything complicated that folks are asking for. I think people are asking for transparency and communication. It's still not happening. So those questions that Councilmember Don asked, Councilmember Sanchez asked, I heard those answers, but I genuinely do not believe they're true. And I implore all of us to not vote for any transfer ordinance and any more money for One Philly until they put themselves in a position to address these issues. So I will be voting no today, and I will be encouraging other people to vote no, or I will ask that the administration add an amendment so that the request is closer to 25 million instead of 26 million, so that there are no dollars given to One Philly until some of these issues are rectified. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. This is an internal transfer from one class to another, so it's already part of their budget, but I hear you. I think that I want to allow Marissa to kind of respond. I'm very concerned about any independently elected official requesting transparency and not getting a response. I heard you during the budget. So Marissa, what could you say on the record as it relates to a request from elected official on this issue?
Absolutely. So we absolutely heard your request during the budget hearings. Our staff are working, as we do on all questions that we get during the budget process, to work with the impacted departments to provide written responses that are fully documented. And so my understanding is the responses to your questions are in the works. We've already started delivering written responses to questions, and I'll double check today on the ones that were received, both stated orally in the budget hearing, as well as we received written, what we're calling off the record, but really on the record budget questions, and we will absolutely diligently respond to those. And I do just want to affirm that this is not a request for increased funding for One Philly, but just a reallocation between departments and classes, but no change in the total dollars to be expended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that explanation. A couple follow-up questions. Ms. Waxman, have you yourself as a city employee been a victim of One Philly as it relates to any type of glitches or errors?
No.
Okay. Do you know any city employees yourself that have been a victim of these glitches or errors?
As with any implementation of a new system, we certainly are aware that there were errors and that the city worked very hard to correct those errors. And that as we've moved through this process, the volume of those errors has gone down. That doesn't detract from the fact that errors are upsetting, particularly when it hits them in the wallet. We understand that. And we can certainly, we will certainly respond to your questions, getting into the meat of that to provide responses to what you've asked.
So I completely understand exactly what you're asking for. But again, I will be voting no. I think that your answer it doesn't justify what we're communicating as it relates to specific transparency issues. I understand that when you unroll something that there are going to be technical problems. I 100% get that. I understand that we have a lot of city employees. That's another huge issue. But again, if we can't have a basic level of transparency as it relates to not just communicating how the problem happened, because I still don't know what went wrong. No one has told me this is what went wrong. But on top of not knowing what went wrong, I think it's a violation of my rights and all of the rights of the employees of the city of Philadelphia for you to take money out of our paycheck without our approval. Like, I really need you to understand that people are taking money out of city employees' paychecks without their approval. There is no signature. There is no transparency. There is no conversation. There's a letter in the mail, and then people's money come out of their paychecks. So I understand that you're working on it and you're trying to get back to me. I completely respect that. But I feel like to ask me to vote for anything for One Philly without being able to answer those basic questions is disingenuous, and I will not be voting for this transfer ordinance today until something is changed, until there's something that is different. So the administration can offer an amendment for less money. You can just ignore me like you've been in the last 3 hearings. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think that response is not what we need on the record, and I will not be voting for this transfer ordinance today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. I know what Councilmember Thomas is asking, what is your policy around transparency and notification when you make an error? Have you guys promulgated a policy, articulated that to our collective bargaining agreements as well as to the folks who may not fall within those bargaining agreements about how you're going to manage future errors? Has there been a policy developed?
So I'm not sure if there's anyone on the line because that's not an area I administer, but maybe Kat, you can speak to that.
Yeah. So we try our hardest not to make any errors. That's our first principle, right? So the first thing is we want to pay everybody on time and correctly. In the course of running a large, complex payroll system, sometimes things happen. And our goal is always to communicate when it does happen, communicate it quickly to the people impacted, and then resolve it quickly as well. If the employee who's impacted by the issue is covered by a bargaining unit, then we do reach out to the local or the head of the union and let them know what's happening. This is always our intent. That's always our goal, is to communicate it quickly and resolve it quickly.
So I'm asking for what is the policy around when an error that you make. Notifying someone of a decision is not a policy. It's sort of like, we made a mistake and this is how we're going to correct it. What have we done to promulgate regulations that say we made an error, we need to reduce money from your paycheck, and are we giving people an option about how that is done, or we just make a decision that we're doing it for the purposes of correcting our error? We make the decision of when, how. That's what I'm asking.
When we had overpayments to our employees, we went through a process to recover the overpayments from the employees. The process was that their departmental HR representatives were to reach out to them and notify them of the error and work with them on how they wanted to repay it, right? So the option was you could repay it all at once. You could repay it over a period of time in an amount that you specified. The minimum was, and this was just for the overpayments that were initially made in 2019, the minimum was for a period of time was $50 gross per pay. And so we did work with the employees through that process. At At some point, though, so in that process, at some point, if the employees were non-responsive, we did start an automatic deduction of $50 per pay gross.
And that was done with what type of notification?
That was done with notification via their departmental HR and payroll teams. And so they had, I think what you're saying is, like, was there a standard period, like a 30-day notification period or a 60-day notification period?
Was there a policy? I mean, one size, you have to give people notification. Informing them and consulting with them are two different things, because you didn't give them a say, or were there different options provided to different people?
Madam Chair, just for a point of information based on some things that's already been said, my staff and I, we did reach out. We did reach out once we received the notification to be able to try to have a conversation to negotiate what it is that we could and could not do. And I don't want to make this about individual people, because this is a systematic problem that's impacting hundreds of employees in the city of Philadelphia. I think our concern is that if we could not get a response and we could not be put in a position to have a conversation prior to the automatic deductions taking place, and if they already had our signature and were able to do it with us without any level of communication, right, then what happens to other city employees? So I understand that these things are in place, but once you get that notification and I told you to reach out to certain people to try to make things happen, when those people don't respond to you and you don't get an opportunity to have a conversation, then the automatic deductions begin. And as you can tell based on a response, there's no clear system in place, and there's no time period that says that, if we don't hear from you, this is what we'll do. And when you do have a time period, like you just said, that can't be universal across the board for everybody. And, I'll stop right there, because, again, Madam Chair, I just don't think that the issue is being taken as serious as it should be. I think that is the level of concern that I have. And I think that if, just out of a courtesy, if the administration knew that they were going to be asking us for an appropriation transfer ordinance today, they should have briefed us prior to this, because we've been screaming and hollering about this issue, so we did not have to have this conversation right now. Madam Chair, you of all people know that I will prefer to get things done in a way that's effective and not on a record like this. But the fact that I'm being ignored, the fact that we're not able to have these conversations off the record, it puts me in a position where this is the only way we're able to have this dialogue. So I understand the things that are in place, but again, based on lived experiences, that's just not what we went through. And I'm sure that that's not what other city employees are going through. Thank you for allowing me to have that point of information.
Thank you, Council Member Thomas. I don't want to condone or support any disrespect or any lack of transparency at request for elected officials. This is, as you mentioned, the third time we have this public discussion, and the fact that you have not had a meeting and that people have not reached out to you to say, we're promulgating regulations, this is what's going to be the policy, is problematic for me. It's because today it's you, tomorrow it'll be me. So I'm trying to get to a place where we're not going to have this conversation the fourth time. So I'm going to ask Marissa, what is your recommendation around this? Because for a department not to reach out to a council member who has publicly made requests is problematic. And I know you're working on budget responses, but I think that the council member is right. He doesn't want to make it about his office. This is happening to hundreds of people who don't have this forum. So what are we going to do different this time so that we're not having this conversation again?
So I think obviously, in addition to meeting with the council member outside the hearing, which I think we can do, and if it's not done already, obviously that is something we can do to get both his individual situation, because there's an individual component, but also then what is the global. And I think Ms. Lamb has already started to lay out times. I think what I hear you asking for is a very specific, when X happens, we do X, Y, and Z. Here are the opportunities for an individual to sort of stay in and make that proactively known. One of the things we can do is perhaps, but I certainly don't want to get ahead of my colleagues in One Philly and OHR, is that once we have that developed, proactively share that out so folks have an understanding of that before something goes wrong, so that they have a sense of, hey, if something looks wonky when I see my paycheck and I'm not seeing any pension payments coming out, one, how can an individual who's, looking at their paycheck and sees something weird intervene early? And then two, if that stage doesn't happen, if, you don't see that, at least have a pre-understanding, okay, when things go wrong, this is how it unfolds. And so I can certainly commit to working with colleagues within the administration to work along both those streams of the individual events so that there can be that forensic backwards transparency, but also some of that forward looking, okay, things are going to go wrong. That's a given for anything. But here's what you can expect when things go wrong.
And also, if I can just add, Madam Chair, also, what are we doing to retroactively communicate with people who've had issues in the past? So not just what are we doing moving forward, right? But we are aware that there are 170, I believe, 5 or so, please don't quote me on that number, but over 170 people who are victims of what I'm just talking about as far as issues with pension. That does include people with issues with overtime, issues with days lost, and issues with other One Philly issues that's been communicated to us because we've done a deep dive into it. So yes, we want to know what are we going to do in the future, but also what are we going to do about past mistakes? Because again, if I'm saying that there's been no communication with me, I'm sure that these other folks have issues as well, too. And I think as employees and as folks who really care about the people who we're asking to serve our city, we need to have some level of communication with them, too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Member. So yes, Marissa, I'd like to request that there be some outline promulgated around what are we doing going back and what are we doing forward. And I'm going to expect you to have some sort of draft and a meeting with the Council Member before this comes for a final vote on the Council floor, because I don't want to have this conversation again publicly. I understand that this is a new program and a new policy, but I had a similar situation with someone in the office, where emergency check had to be issued. We have single mothers, and in their particular case, the person was a single mother. And again, no, they don't. These other employees don't have this public forum to be able to get their issues aggrieved, and we should not be able to. We should not take this lightly. So, I'm going to ask that be done prior to this coming to a final vote on the Council floor, and I'm going to allow the Council Member Thomas and respect his no vote on this because again, it's the third conversation. So, thank you very much. Thank you, Council Member Thomas. The Chair recognizes Council Member Heenan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, you asked half of the question that I had, if not 3/4 of it early on, so I appreciate that. And it's to our city solicitor Cortez, regarding the $1.4 million to the law department. The remaining question that I have on that transfer is, it's mentioned arising from labor. I understand the employment part of it in HR, but the labor aspect of that, is that at all in response to anything? Because we created a Office of Labor and have new labor policies.
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Heenan. I believe when we said labor, we meant labor and employment regarding the employment discrimination cases against the district attorney.
Okay,
So
that's great. I only raised the question because we've asked for an increase for the Department of Labor, or Office of Labor, and there's a cry from a lot of members and other groups for an increase of funding for the Department of Labor. So I just didn't know if the costs were shifting in that, and if we needed to take the Department of Labor in more consideration of receiving more funds. So I appreciate you just clearing up that simple error on my end. So thank you for that. I do have a question for our procurement commissioner, if Monique is still on.
Yes, I'm still here.
Thank you, Monique. And it's a little bit unrelated to the snow removal invoices that we've had that we needed to put in the past and finalize. But you're asking for an increase of $2.294 million in Class 200. The 1.8 is associated with the presidential election and advertisements and everything. It leaves a balance of roughly around $500,000. unless I missed it with Councilman Dom, would you be able to talk about the balance of the appropriations request?
Yeah, so the balance of the appropriation requests are for past due invoices, some of which are for the not last fiscal year, for the beginning back in July. So again, we are working with departments. We're working with the CAO to establish what exactly are the specific required advertisements for each department. What happens is, to be honest with you, departments make requests for advertising that goes beyond, we believe, beyond what the requirements are. And right now, procurement pays for that out of their allocation for advertising. So historically, we have gone over budget for advertising, and we are working to establish some accountability around the way the city advertises, making sure that we maintain the parameters of advertising in the 3 highest circulated newspapers in the city and not beyond that. In the case where departments choose to go beyond the requirement, we would like to move forward with having departments be responsible for that and not having procurement be responsible for that. So we're working with the Office of Finance regarding the allocation, but we're also, again, working with the CAO. They're doing a deep review of the regulations by department to understand what is required in terms of advertising. Newspaper advertisement is costly. If we were able to move maybe to a different model where we were able to advertise web-based as opposed to in newspapers, we may be able to cut some costs. If we were able to modify the way that we actually advertise some of our required advertisements, if we were able to modify them and maybe take up less print space, maybe not advertise for as many days, in terms of print, and advertise maybe once in a while, once a week if it's required. Let's just say it's required 3 times a week for 2 weeks. Maybe we should only print once a week. Maybe we should consolidate. We're trying to come up with some different ways to do print advertising that will produce a cost savings for the city. But right now, the way that the requirements and the regulations are written, it is becoming costly. There are less subscribers to print newspapers, and it is driving up the cost of advertising for print. If we were able to move again to a web-based or online, or maybe via social media for some of the advertising, I believe our costs would be reduced.
And so are you saying that $500,000, the balance of the $500,000 in your midterm transfer is all for advertisement costs for FY21? So through June, the end of June of this fiscal year, that is approximately, right, not to be exact, $500,000 of outstanding invoices, or do you expect the $500,000 to transcend and roll into the FY22 budget?
We are hoping that it does not roll into the FY22 budget, but again, we do not have invoices beyond March of this year. So there are still, and that is for a variety of the newspapers, the 3 that we advertise in. So for some, we have up to March, but for some, we are still waiting for advertisements that ran back in January. So we made an estimate, and we believe that the $500,000 will make us whole, but there could be, a case where we may still be slightly over rolling into fiscal 22.
Okay, and for the record, and I know members of council know, we're required by the charter to advertise. When it comes to public advertisements, hearings, fundings, RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, and all the other RFs that we have within our city procurement office. Is that correct?
It is correct, but we have a number of We have a contracts hub that was developed just this year and released in July of 2020, where all of it consolidates all of the opportunities that are available. And that is, of course, at no cost to, that was a homegrown development, meaning it was developed within the city by our OIT team. And that is the platform where all of our bids, RFPs, RFIs, and the like are advertised. We also have PHO contracts, which is where all procurement opportunities are let, which is web-based, as well as eContract Philly, which is where all of the professional services opportunities are available. So there are 3 web-based platforms that the city has where the public at large are able to identify and review and review procurement opportunities or contracting opportunities.
Okay. One last thing, Madam Chair. Commissioner, are you due to come back as one of the department callbacks?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let me just leave you with a parting question then. So last year, due to the pandemic and the lack of resources, procurement held back on a lot of contracts that were bid and responded to and awarded. Are those awardees or lettings permission to proceed after winning a proposal or contract with Public Works in any of our departments in the city of Philadelphia? Are they going to be let out soon, or are you going to have to go through the expensive process of rebidding everything over the past year and a half?
So,
and what is your backlog?
Well, I can't speak to the backlog right off the top of my head, but in terms of Public Works, those are departmental decisions. Those are not procurement decisions to not move forward with the project. Departments are able to delay projects. We do communicate with the awarded vendors if a project is delayed. We do have some projects where the scope has changed, and we are still working with departments as well as the vendors regarding those changes in scope so that the projects are able to move forward. But if there are project scope changes by the department, or if there are some funding reallocations, those are all departmental decisions, and procurement certainly works with the departments to move those forward again, and we communicate with the vendors appropriately. And this is all done in conjunction with the law department.
Well, in particular, water, streets, and airport all come through the procurement department. All right, after working together and coming up with an RFP or an RFQ or whatever the public the public process is, or what its specific purpose is for. So that is very specific. What I'm asking for: water, streets, and the airport, which I know that does come through your department. So maybe we can talk offline, or if you can circle back to the chair and or the council president's office on what has been leaded or awarded that has not proceeded, or it has been held up due to the pandemic and or lack of funds, such as we have the water rate increase, and so a lot of water taps are holding up development in the city of Philadelphia. A lot of our streets have been held up because of not the ADAs, because that's federally funded, all right, but some other street repavings, because they need to be in concert and working with all the other utilities when they repave the street. So a lot of things have understandably have been put on hold. So I just want to err on caution for public, for our public dollars, that if we have to go through an entire year and a half, 2-year process, we'll never put people fully back to work in our city. So I'll circle back with you, but I just wanted to get that on the record while you were here, and thank you for clearing up some of the the differences in the dollars that are being reappropriated here today. Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Heenan. And yes, let me affirm that, it's very important. And I know during the COVID, as we worked through the development work group, it was important that we activate the market and get our work done and get people working, as we asked others to continue to bring their workers back. And this was definitely one area, as you alluded to. I know I had several conversations with Streets and Water Department around that, so I agree with you. It's important for people to have predictability for that labor force. So thank you for highlighting that. Just Commissioner Nesmith Joyner, I just want to put for the record, I know our advertising legal requirements, but we've said that we're going to go to a different normal. And I always caution that we use money as a reason not to advertise in some of the local and neighborhood-based papers where we're trying to reach unique constituencies in our advertising. And so I always worry because I know our charter requirement, and I know Council President Clark one time put in a charter change and we never moved forward on it. I want to make sure that language minority and neighborhood-based papers are part of our new normal when we're trying to reach particular constituencies. And I don't want money to be the reason for that, because as much as we want web-based technology, we learned during COVID that not everybody has access, right? And so we're still working through that. So just a cautionary note as we move forward. So thank you very much, Commissioner, for your response. The chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson. My apologies. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just have a couple of questions for Register of Wills regarding the 137K transfer ordinance.
Yes.
Hey, good morning, Madam Register. How are you today?
I'm fine.
Good. Just a couple questions. First, I want to start off by acknowledging the work you have been doing as the new Register of Wills as it relates to making sure that people who are primarily living in low-income communities understand the quality of wealth building with addressing tangled titles and really understanding the value of their homes. And also just want to acknowledge the work that you and your team have been doing as it relates to still helping people get married and the transitioning of deeds for constituents during the health pandemic, rather through appointment or support virtually. So I just want to start off to acknowledge you and your team for your hard work around those particular areas, which is definitely needed as we address the issue of gentrification and development in our neighborhoods, particularly from a wealth building standpoint. Couple questions. You're welcome. Couple questions. Could you give me an idea of, and I know this is pre-pandemic contracts that you're seeking support for, the level of vendors that are minority that your office contracts with, and then two, what's the process for awarding contracts to vendors, and then three, what's the type of vendors that your office are engaging in as it relates to the work that your office is doing?
Yes. All the vendors that we hired for when I started were all of them were minority contracts. Prior to me coming, I don't know how many was minority contracts. These were pretty much one-time contracts for the audit, and we had to hire attorneys for the litigation with the FOP suit that we're still in litigation with. But we had pretty much 100% minority participation.
Awesome. Could you state for the record those particular vending firms, legal vending firms, and then the audit firm that was used, that was mentioned during this hearing?
Sure. Emilio, can you give him the names of the contractors that we contracted with?
Yes. Good morning. The auditing firm was Horsey, Buckner, Hefner for the auditing contract. The public outreach was Bellevue Strategy. and the legal firm for our litigation was, just drawing a blank here. I'll have to pull that up for you, Councilman. I just don't have that in front of me right now, but I'll get it right over to you.
Okay. All right.
But that firm was a minority firm as well.
Awesome. Thank you. I think you're kind of setting the bar for various city agencies, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure, at least our agenda, city council, is that we're pushing either our independent row offices, but also our city departments to engage in diversity and inclusion when it comes to contracting with African Americans and people of color. In terms of the audit that was done, obviously this was pre-pandemic.
Yes.
What were the findings as it relates to office efficiencies and your strategy in terms of, again, continuously moving on the process of progress with your office?
We'll send you over the findings, but some of the findings was how we were intaking checks. They found that not enough people were touching the checks, so we can make sure that more than one person was receiving the check, and that was the major thing we found out. As a result of that, we opened a mailroom because at one point it was just the mail just was coming in, and the receptionist was opening the mail, and the checks were just sitting on desks. So now we have a process of making sure when the checks come in through the mailroom, it gets recorded in, and it goes through different processes. It's just not one person touching these checks. We also found that at one point checks just was laying out on desks, and this is like overnight. And that's one of the things I noticed, although we, think that that's okay. So we had the immediate process of everybody that receives checks. The checks have to be locked up every night, and so that's some of the details that they helped us find out. They helped us with job descriptions. There were no job descriptions, so we wouldn't be able to even evaluate how our workers were doing because there were no job descriptions. Of course, the city has a job description like clerk, but we actually defined each job description, and so we pretty much figured out exactly what everybody was doing, and where we seen there was some duplication, and it's really in depth. We can send you over the conclusions of their audit.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that's good to see the progress and the transformation of how you're taking the office to another level. I know you have like outside interests and stakeholders who are so-called, I guess they would call themselves progressive, that think that we shouldn't have row offices here in the city of Philadelphia, be it Register of Wills, be it the sheriff's office, be it the commissioner's office. But this is an example of taking the office and transforming it, but mainly showing the value of how, particularly in low-income communities, your office plays a major role. But I also want to acknowledge also the things that you're doing to really streamline efficiencies with the Register of Wills office to take it to the next level. The last question is, I remember after you became the new Register of Wills, there was a movement around trying to unionize the staff and the workers at the Register of Wills office. Is this tied into the FOP litigation, or what's the status of individuals?
Well, actually, the office is represented by the FOP. They actually we actually won the case that they presented against us, and is an appeal. That's why we're still in litigation, but we actually won.
Okay, all right, that's good information.
They appealed it now, so we're in talks now to come to some sort of compromise. But through our research, with our legal research, we did find, in fact, that the FOP do represent the Register of Wills.
Okay,
It wasn't
All right.
just a gentleman's shake. They are actually our union.
Okay. All right. That's good information. I know that didn't know that clearly prior to today. All right. Thank you very much, Register Will. Madam Chair, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Take care.
And Emilio, do you want to add any other things about the audit, or please make sure that the councilman and this committee gets
Yes,
these
Councilman.
Please make sure myself and members of the committee get a copy. And just for clarity, and the FOP represents workers at the Register Will's office, but they aren't law enforcement officials. And I guess we can have a longer discussion about this, because I'm kind of, and this happened way before you became Register Will. I'm just trying to understand the dynamics of how law enforcement officials actually represent, basically, I guess I would call it civilian workers in the Register of Will's office. But that's a different conversation to have at a different time. But okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Madam Register, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chairman, for your questions. I'm going to ask, does anybody else from my colleagues have any questions for our panelists? Thank you for your testimony. If there are no more questions from members of the committee or any of the departments who have submitted written testimony for this hearing, is there anyone else here to testify on bill number 210238 whose name hasn't been called yet?
Councilwoman
Yes.
Sanchez, I'm sorry. I just wanted to correct. I had testified that it would be an onboarding. Commissioner Carney for prisons for late July. My calculation right off the top of my head was off. And it'll be late August. So I just wanted to put that on and submit that on the record. Thank you for that. Allow me the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner, for correcting that for the record, and thank you. I know this is hard work and you're under tremendous pressure, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, seeing no other person here to testify, this concludes the hearing. We will now go into our public meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll call? Again, this is the public meeting of the Committee on Appropriations. If there's no other further questions, I want to thank our panelists and our witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinion. We invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the meeting before we officially start a public meeting. We will pause briefly to allow participants to leave the hearing. Okay. We will now reconvene and go into our public meeting and a call for a roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a brief words when responding so that your image can be displayed on screen. Clerk?
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember Heenan.
Present.
Councilmember O.
Present.
And Councilmember Dom.
Present.
Thank you. So this public meeting to report bill number 210328. The chair recognizes Vice Chair Councilmember Johnson for a motion on bill 210328.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that bill number 210238 be reported from this committee with the favorable recommendation. Further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. Has been moved and properly second from Councilmember O. The chair notes that has been moved and properly second that bill number 210328 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor of this motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Note for the
Madam
record.
Chair, just want to say for the record, now I will be voting aye, but also I do have grave concerns about Philly 1 and just want to echo the sentiments of my colleague, Councilman Isaiah Thomas, and that the administration should be forthcoming, and he shouldn't have to have a committee hearing to get his issues and questions addressed. And so I will be voting aye, with reservations for the record, and we'll be working with Councilman Isaiah Thomas to address this issue as we move forward. And this is the talk in the barbershops inside the neighborhood, so I do want to say that for the record. So it's not just Isaiah Thomas saying this. When I'm actually in barbershops getting my hair cut and I run into the sanitation workers, they're giving me a hard time about the very same thing. And so I will be voting aye with reservation, but we'll be following up with my colleague to address this issue with the administration.
Thank you. So the chair notes that Councilmember Thomas has voted against it, but this motion does carry, and I do want to echo your sentiments. I have been assured by our budget director that they will put forth and promulgate some policy, and that a meeting will be had with the council member prior to final approval on the council floor. I agree with you. No council member should be left without questions, answers, and clarity. Councilmember Thomas is not the only person who's brought this to the attention. Councilmember Dom and others. It's very important as we move away from these legacy systems, that these systems, when they work, and they will have errors, but when we have errors, the burden should not be on the person that is the victim of that error, but it should really be transparent. There should be a hotline, there should be a timeline, all of the things that are basic to general operating best practices. So I thank you. So I have to move the motion, move the motion, but the chair recognizes Councilmember Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to join in with you and Councilmember Johnson in support of Councilmember Thomas that I will be a no vote if this issue is not resolved when this comes to the hearing. An absolute no. So it's got to get resolved.
Madam Chair, Councilman O'Neill, I agree with the three colleagues who are supporting Councilman Thomas, and I am in total agreement with their position and what you've all said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Neill.
Madam Chair, I'm going to have to echo the same thing. I guess it's pretty much well felt that if this is not resolved, then I will be voting no when we get to the next vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman O, and thank you all members of this committee. Again, it's very, very important. We're independently elected, and this call for transparency is hugely important. I know that it was one of the things that Councilman Kenny pushed for and advocated strongly when he was a member of this body, and I'm sure that he will make sure that this issue gets resolved. So this concludes the business before the Committee on Appropriations today. I want to thank you all very much for your patience, all of the departments for their response and their work. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.